Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Ben Francis, and as usual, we'll start off the show with the Ukraine update on day 1002 of the conflict. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said Ukraine can take back Crimea only through diplomatic means. We cannot spend dozens of thousands of our people so that they perish for the sake of Crimea coming back. We understand Crimea can be brought back diplomatically. The Ukrainian president told Fox News. Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014. Quote, I was already mentioning that we are ready to bring Crimea back diplomatically, Zelensky said. Asked on Fox whether Ukraine might give up territory for peace, Zelensky said, quote, we cannot legally acknowledge any occupied territory of Ukraine as Russian. That is about those territories occupied by Putin before the full-scale invasion since 2014. Legally, we are not acknowledging that. We are not adopting that. Russia staged a, quote, massive information psychological attack against Ukraine by spreading a fake warning about an immense mass air attack, Kiev's main director of intelligence said on Wednesday. This message is a fake. It contains grammatical errors typical of Russian information and psychological operations. Chinese President Xi Jinping, on a state visit in Brazil, said he wanted to see, quote, more voices committed to peace and pave the way for a political solution in the Ukraine crisis. The Chinese state news agency, Xi reported. Ukraine has fired UK-made Storm Shadow missiles into Russia for the first time since the beginning of the war. Video circulated by pro-Russian war bloggers indicated that up to 12 missiles struck a target believed to be a command headquarters in the village of Marino in the Kursk region, where Ukraine holds territory. President Zelensky thanked the US and President Biden for the provision of landmines to Ukrainian troops, calling it, quote, essential to stop Russian assaults, in a video addressed on Wednesday. In addition to the landmines, the latest $275 million US aid package includes drones, HIMARS rockets, and artillery. The United States' decision to send anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine, criticized by human rights groups, was triggered by a change in Russian battlefield tactics, according to the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Quote, they lead with dismounted forces who are able to close and do things to kind of pave the way for mechanized forces, he said, adding that the Ukrainians have a need for things that can help slow down that effort on part of the Russians. US and Ukrainian officials confirmed Ukraine has used US-made attack missiles to strike targets within Russia. The Netherlands have handed the final two of 18 promised F-16 fighter jets to a training facility in Romania, where Ukrainian pilots and ground staff are now being taught to fly and maintain the jets in battle, the Dutch Defense Ministry has said. The Biden administration has moved to forgive about $4.7 billion of U.S. loans given to Ukraine, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said on Wednesday, as outgoing officials to do what they can before leaving office to bolster Ukraine in its war against Russia. A funding bill passed by Congress in April included just over $9.4 billion of forgivable loans for economic and budgetary support, half of which the president could cancel after 15th November. Italy will continue to provide support to Ukraine in its war against Russia, the defense minister Guido Crosetto said on Wednesday. And now moving on to the Middle East update. At least 44,056 people have been killed and 104,000 injured since the 7th of October in Gaza. The International Criminal Court, ICC, has issued arrest warrants for the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, the country's former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and the Hamas military leader, Mohammed Deif, for alleged war crimes relating to Israel's war on Gaza. Netanyahu's office denounced the chamber's decision as anti-Semitic. Israel Katz, Gallant's replacement as defense minister, described it as a, quote, moral disgrace. entirely tainted by anti-Semitism. A member of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government, Itamar Ben-Gvir, called for Israel to permanently annex and settle the occupied West Bank territories in response to the warrant. In a statement, Hamas said it welcomed the decision and encouraged the court to, quote, expand the scope of accountability to all criminal occupation leaders. Balkir Jarrah, Associate International Justice Director at Human Rights Watch, said today's decision was important because it breaks, quote, the perception that certain individuals are beyond the reach of the law. The Irish Parliament, Simon Harris, has said that the decision, or parliamentarian, sorry, has said that the decision to issue arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant could not be more serious. And now moving on to our first and most major story of the night, which we've already touched on. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, and Mohammed al-Masri. The International Criminal Court, as just mentioned, or the ICC, has issued arrest warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the country's former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Hamas's military leader, alleging war crimes relating to Israel's war on Gaza. It is the first time that leaders of a democratic and Western-aligned state have been charged by the court in the most monumentous decision of its 22-year history. Netanyahu and Gallant are at risk of arrest if they travel to any of the 124 countries that signed the Rome Statute establishing the court. Israel claims to have killed Deif in an airstrike, that's the Hamas military leader, in July, but the court's pre-trial chamber said it would, quote, continue to gather information to confirm his death. The chamber ruled there was reasonable grounds to believe Netanyahu and Gallant bore criminal responsibility as co-perpetrators for the, quote, war crime of starvation as a method of warfare and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. The three-judge panel also said it found reasonable grounds to believe Deif was responsible for crimes against humanity and war crimes, including murder, torture, rape, and hostage-taking related to the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October in 2023, in which Hamas fighters from other Palestinian resistance groups killed more than 1,200 people, mostly Israeli civilians, and kidnapped 250. Commenting on the International Criminal Court, or ICC's arrest warrant, SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn MP said, quote, Keir Starmer must confirm that the UK government will comply with the International Criminal Court and do its bit to enforce the arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. The Prime Minister must also apologise for having previously condoned the Israeli government's war crimes in Gaza, and now commit to ending all arms sales to Israel with immediate effect. There is no question that the actions of Hamas on October the 7th constitute an appalling war crime, but that did not give the Israeli government the green light to carry out its own war crimes against innocent Palestinian civilians. More than 40,000 Palestinian women, children, and men have been killed since the bombardment of Gaza began, and thousands more have been injured or displaced. The Israeli government stands accused of deliberate attacks on civilians and the use of starvation as a weapon of war. The United Kingdom government must finally stand firm on the side of justice and human rights, not the criminal collective punishment of the Palestinian people. And now moving to British news, £17.4 billion UK government borrowing in October topped the forecast. The United Kingdom's government borrowed more than expected in October as debt interest payments pushed the public finances deeper into the red, piling pressure on the Chancellor Rachel Reeves as she attempts to grow the economy. Borrowing rose to £17.4 billion last month, the second highest October figure since monthly records began in 1993, and despite a rise in inheritance tax receipts. City economists had expected a smaller figure of about 12 billion for October, after the UK borrowed more than 16 billion in September. The Office of National Statistics (ONS) said public sector net borrowing was £1.6 billion higher than the same month last year. In a further blow to efforts by Reeves, the Chancellor, to bolster the economy and bring down debt levels, the figures showed that monthly central government debt interest rose to £9.1 billion, the highest October figure on the record. The cost of government borrowing on international markets has fallen since last month's budget. The interest rate on 10-year high bond has fallen from 4.6% to about 4.4%. But the large slice of debt payments linked the retail price index measure of inflation increased since September. Reeves has loosened Treasury's budget rules to allow for more borrowing over the next 5 years. In her budget, she set out a real terms increase in day-to-day spending on public services of 4.3% this year and 2.6% next year, before penciling in a rise of 1.3% each year. The ONS said an expected drop in tax receipts after two big cuts to national insurance contributions had failed to materialize. Quote, however, with spending on public services, benefits, and debt interest costs all up on last year, expenditure rose faster than revenue overall, it said. Matt Swannell, the chief economic advisor to the EY Item Club, said, quote, despite the change announced at the budget, fiscal policy will continue to tighten over the next few years. Separate figures from the HMRC showed that tax receipts from estates in the UK rose to £5 billion in the first 7 months of 2024-25 financial year, an 11% increase on the £4.6 billion received in the same period in the previous year. Now, moving on to the reception of the budget in Scotland. A poll finds most Scots think the UK budget will leave them worse off. More than 75% of Scots believe Labour's recent budget will make them worse off or make no difference to their standard of living. According to a new Survation poll for Progress Scotland, as reported in the Scotsman Today, 43% of Scots, the largest group of opinion, believe Labour's budget will make them worse off, with a further 35% saying it will make no difference. A total of 78% of those polled said they believed the Westminster budget will not make them better off. Only 12% said the budget would make them better off, representing a third of the percentage of Scots who voted for Labour in the last general election. SNP MSP Joe Fitzpatrick said, quote, it is truly damning that when people are struggling to get by as a result of Westminster's cost of living crisis, nearly 80% of Scots think the Labour government's budget will not deliver the help they need or will even make things worse. With food prices set to spiral along with another increase in energy bills and mortgage rates on the rise, it's shameful that Labour's first post-election budget is set to pile even more misery onto households. Keir Starmer's budget is also set to hit small businesses, charities and care homes with its national insurance increase. Quote, whether it's coal, oil, renewables or agriculture, successive Westminster governments of all colours have proven that they cannot be trusted to manage Scotland's vital industries. Quote, despite Labour's promises of change, it's now obvious Scots will continue to pay the price for disastrous decisions taken in Westminster. And moving to some more Scottish news, support for Scottish independence is on the rise. A new poll conducted after the new Labour government delivered its budget has shown support for Scottish independence is on the rise. The Survation poll for Progress Scotland found that 48% of Scots supported independence. This shows an increase from the previous poll conducted to mark the 10th anniversary of the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. The same poll also found respondents supporting independence as their first choice for constitutional change, with the favoured number one option for people in Scotland being independence in the European Union. The SNP has said it is not surprising that the support for independence is increasing after Keir Starmer's budget made it clear quote, the problem for Scotland is government from Westminster. Commenting, SNP MSP Rona Mackay said, quote, the Scottish National Party have used the limited powers of devolution to improve the lives of people across Scotland, whether that's free prescription and tuition fees or introducing the Scottish Child Payment and protecting Scots from cruel policies like the bedroom tax. Where Scotland had the power to do so, we've taken actions which put the interests and values of people in Scotland first. Imagine how much more could be achieved with the full powers of a normal independent country. Quote, it's no surprise more people are seeing that Scotland would be better off with the full powers of independence when, after 14 years of Tory government, Keir Starmer's Labour government is continuing to force people in Scotland to suffer cuts with a deeply disappointing budget. Quote, the problem for Scotland is not just Tory governments, the problem for Scotland is government from Westminster. The SNP will continue to set out a better alternative, demonstrating how independence can allow us to properly tackle the challenges facing people in Scotland and build a better, more prosperous society for everyone. And now, moving back to a story on the Labour government, the IFG report, or a IFG report, says Labour's new public bodies are likely to come at a high cost. A new Institute for Government report has found that Labour is creating or overhauling at least 17 public bodies, which are likely to come at a high cost. Launching a new, quote, tracker of public bodies, the think tank warned of some of the pitfalls when setting up government agencies from scratch, saying, quote, successfully creating a new public body is difficult and entails high fixed costs in terms of time, budget, and leadership focus. The Institute for Government found the price tag of creating a new government department can be £15 million in set-up costs plus £34 million in lost productivity. It said, while public bodies were rarely on the same scale as departments, creating them can be more costly, such as when they need to be set up from scratch rather than refitting existing space and integrating existing systems. Matthew Gill, the author of the IFG report, said, quote, public bodies, from the National Wealth Fund to the National Care Service, will be central to the Labour government's success, but they are hard to build well, and many questions about the funding, governance, and remit of these 17 bodies so far announced remain unanswered. Our government report provides a gesture based on lessons learned that they have not been clearly set out from before. The new Labour government has wasted no time in bringing forward legislation to set up bodies such as the Fair Work Agency and the Armed Forces Commission and GB Energy. However, there is little detail on the costs, with the impact assessment for the new Fair Work body stating, quote, it has not been possible to estimate the setup costs of the FWA associated with bringing together existing enforcement bodies, or the cost associated with new state enforcement responsibilities, including the enforcement of holiday pay regulations. Other bodies, such as the football regulator, will ultimately be paid for by an industrial levy. The impact assessment for the legislation said, quote, the setup costs will initially fall to the Exchequer. Once the regulator is operational, levy payments are expected to fund the regulator. The levy will claw back the majority of costs incurred during the setup of the regulator and will also cover the ongoing running costs of the regulator. Some public bodies promised by Labour in its manifesto, including the Ethics and Integrity Commission, have not yet been established or detailed in legislation as of yet. The IFG said most new governments set up new public bodies, and that between 2000 and 2023, between 2 and 12 public bodies were established each year, although a much greater number have been abolished. Setting out 10 lessons for setting up public bodies successfully, it said it was necessary to define its mission clearly, pointing to the Independent Commission on Civil Aviation Noise, ICCAN, which was abolished within 3 years, because politicians, civil servants, and leaders never agreed what it was actually for. And now moving to American news, the U.S. Justice Department said Google must sell Chrome to end search monopoly. The United States Department of Justice has proposed a far-reaching overhaul of Google's structure and business practices, including the sale of its Chrome browser, in a bid to end its monopoly on internet search. The DOJ proposals follow a landmark court ruling in August in which a federal judge ruled that Google maintained an illegal monopoly over search services. The proposal filed to a Washington federal court included the forced sale of the Chrome browser and a 5-year ban from entering the browser market, a block on paying third parties such as Apple to make Google the default search engine on their product, and divestment of the Android mobile operating system if the initial proposals do not work. The Department of Justice also said Google should give publishers and content creators the ability to block their data from being used to train its artificial intelligence models. It wants Google's search index, a database of all the web pages it has crawled, to be available to rivals along with search results. The proposal will be considered by the same judge who presided over the Google ruling, Amit Mehta, who will decide next year which specific remedies to impose. Google is also expected to propose its own remedies, and Judge Mehta has set a hearing for April next year where he will hear arguments from both sides. The Department of Justice said in its filing that competition must be restored to a search market dominated by Google, which is owned by Alphabet. The DOJ's push for Chrome to be divested first emerged earlier this week. It said the plan would allow rival search engines to access a browser that, quote, for many users is a gateway to the internet. Chrome could be worth up to $20 billion if it were to be sold off. Google controls about 90% of the online search market, and Chrome, a key means of getting Google search in front of internet users, controls more than 50% of the US browser market. Google's president of global affairs and chief legal officer, Kent Walker, called the proposals staggering and extreme, warning the plans would break many of its products and endanger the security and privacy of US users as a result. Google has said it will appeal the monopoly ruling. And now moving on to Scottish news, resident doctors and dentists in training accept pay deal. Scottish Government Health Secretary Neil Gray has said that NHS Scotland remains the place of choice to work and train after resident doctors and dentists in training accepted a £64.1 million investment in their pay and reward package. The deal will see an 8.5% salary increase, backdated to 1st of April 2024, and a further 2.3% effective from 1st of October 2024. The new pay deal for resident doctors, formerly known as junior doctors, means those at the start of their career will receive a salary increase of £3,418 in 2024-25. For a doctor at the end of the training, the rise will be £7,088 over the same period. A dentist in training at the beginning of their career will receive a salary increase of just over £4,000 in 2024-25, and for those at the end of their training, they will see a rise of nearly £6,000 over the same period. Mr. Gray said, quote, I am very pleased that resident doctors and dentists in training have voted to accept the Scottish Government's pay offer. This demonstrates how much we value them and ensures that NHS Scotland remains the place of choice to work and train. I am pleased we have been able to work together to honour the previous agreement from 2023-24 and I extend my sincere thanks to our hardworking resident doctors and dentists. And moving to another Scottish story in housing news, the Scottish Government said that the upcoming housing bill will strengthen tenants' rights. New Scottish Government legislation will introduce a range of measures to improve renting in Scotland, including strengthening tenants' rights to keep pets. Including strengthening tenants' rights to keep a pet. Measures in the Housing Scotland Bill will allow a renter to make a request to keep a pet in their home, and for that to not be used for that not to be used against them by their landlord. Currently, it is entirely up to the landlord whether a tenant can keep a pet, and they must be given written permission to do so. Other provisions aimed at providing a good quality and affordable rental market include a system of long-term rent controls, with the Scottish Government working with tenants, landlords, investors, and developers to bring forward a system that works for tenants and supports investment in private rented housing, according to the Scottish National Party. Housing Minister Paul McLean said, quote, "Pets are an important part of the family for many people across Scotland. Tenants have the right to feel at home in rented accommodation, and having more control over keeping a pet can play a big part in that, and can have additional benefits for mental well-being." This is just one of a range of measures in the Housing Scotland Bill, including long-term rent controls, which will help to improve the lives of renters and create an affordable, high-quality, and fair renting sector. The bill also meets the Scottish Government's ambition to improve renting experiences in Scotland, whilst also encouraging landlords to invest. We will continue to work to create a system that strengthens renters' rights and supports continued investment in the Scottish retail market. Now moving on to another Scottish story, report showed partnership working between the Scottish Government and councils is helping to deliver on community priorities. A new report has shown how partnership working between the Scottish Government and councils is helping to deliver on community priorities. Signed in June 2023, the Verity House Agreement sets out principles for the Scottish Government and the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, COSLA, the representative body of all 32 councils in Scotland, working together to empower local communities, tackle poverty, transform the economy, and provide high-quality services. The Verity House Stocktake report highlights joint work on local government pay, enabling councils to double the full rate of council tax on second homes, delivering a new national allowance for foster and kinship carers, and close engagement around the Circular Economy Bill. Finance and Local Government Secretary Shona Robinson said the stocktake illustrated the value of the agreement in its first year and how early, open, and regular dialogue has helped to navigate challenges. Ms. Robinson said, quote, "The Verity Health Agreement has built the foundations for us to work alongside local government in a more positive way, which enables meaningful and effective delivery of our shared priorities for the benefits of our communities." Quote, "A key priority for Scottish Government and COSLA over the coming years will be to identify opportunities to improve our partnership approach to fully reflect our shared ambitions, such as tackling child poverty and improving public services." Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everybody who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly donation, thank you very much. We set our current fundraising target in April, hoping to reach £36,000 by the end of the year. It is November, and so far we've raised £17,500. However, to pay our bills and survive, we need to raise this by £12,000 now to get us back on target. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around £2,500. We need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. We are at a crisis point and really need to increase our donations to be able to pay our bills and survive. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford just £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate wherever you can afford. So, thank you and goodbye.